We have almost made it to game week, 7 days away from TCU taking on Stanford. Today we'll break down the Frogs' expectations with a special guest. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, your team every day, Locked On Horned Frogs. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for making the show your first listen. We're also free and available wherever it is you get podcasts in its old-timey audio form. The person next to me, if you're a frequent listener of the show or viewer, you know this man, Matt Jennings, freelance writer, ball knower, just all-around good guy. And he's back. He joins us weekly during the season to talk about TCU, and we either celebrate or lament the results each and every week. But, Matt, how excited are you for football season? As we'll get a few college games this week, but the main dish comes next week. And, of course, we'll get TCU Stanford on Friday. How are you feeling about college football starting up again?
I'm stoked, man. It is always a long journey through the desert to get to this moment. I'm glad that we're finally here. I will be a total sicko, and I'll watch Florida State, Georgia Tech, and I'll watch. I think SMU's playing Nevada. Like I'll put all the games on this Saturday as kind of that opening course, and then absolutely excited for the main event when week one starts in earnest next week. We got to talk to some people about TCU with these Friday night 10:30 kickoffs to start this season multiple times in the last few years. But hey, man, it's really exciting to be back at this moment. I'm excited to talk about it with you.
That classic, you go play an ACC school on the West Coast at 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night, 10:30 in the East Coast time zone. So got to love the very relatable and just all around good world of realignment.
And I was talking about this with someone this week. A funny thing about Stanford, and this is true of a couple of the California schools, is they're on like a quarter system. So if I'm remembering this correctly, their students go back a little bit later than so like the football season starts before students are on campus. So Stanford, already a stadium that is not, especially when they're down, maybe not the most filled up environment post like the peak of the Harbaugh David Shaw years. You compound that with the fact that it's before students are even there and it's on a Friday night. There might be, go look online at the whatever preferred ticket vendor is the sponsor of Locked On Horned Frogs. I'm sure there are going to be tickets available for a reasonable price if you're willing to get out to Palo Alto. So
Gametime. Go to the Gametime app today.
The Gametime app. There we go.
Look at those prices. And, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. One thing that people probably know about you if they listen or watch, Matt's very smart, very intelligent person, was in the Milton Daniel dorm, if you know what that means as a TCU student.
Milton Hilton, man.
Honors college guy. Was Stanford one of the few schools that you didn't get into? Did you apply to Stanford?
I did apply to Stanford, and they and yes, they did reject me. So they're dead to us.
Yeah, screw you, Stanford.
Yeah, forget them. No, I had a really good friend in high school who went to Stanford. And so like I kind of like was like, oh, like maybe I can make it too. But I was not smart enough to pull it off. They were kind enough to give me the rejection letter early on in the process. And so I didn't have to like agonize and wait and like, well, I'll hold off because I wonder. Like they let me know. They let me down right away, which I did appreciate that, if nothing else.
I didn't apply to Stanford, but I don't think they would have let me if I tried. I wasn't exactly that material, but that's okay. We all found our place, and we got a new season coming up. So I wanted to start. I mean, with football, we typically start with quarterback play. Josh Hoover, year two, maybe year one and a half. You know, he played half a season. He missed all of spring camp, I guess. But I want to get your perspective on this, Matt. So last year when you watched him play, what were the things that you liked? What were the things that you feel like, okay, this guy's got to work on this? and sort of how do you see the offense being built around him now as he becomes the full-time starter?
Yeah, I think I liked what I saw on the whole from Josh Hoover last year. And I think from an accuracy perspective, I think he brings what you need to be able to play well in this offense. I think he was able to hit some big plays and some explosive plays that maybe they have been hunting for and not able to find for an early part of the season with Chandler Morris at quarterback. And this is more of a vibes observation than anything else. I think we talked about this last year. There was an attitude shift, or there was just something that felt different with him at quarterback, where it just felt like, there was just a little bit more of a connection. Things didn't feel just slightly out of sorts like they felt at times with Chandler Morris at quarterback. Wishing him all the best at UNT. There just seemed to be a little bit better chemistry between Hoover and this group of receivers once he started taking over. I mean, you saw it in his first game against BYU. Came out and hit the ground running. Absolutely. So I think there's a 62% completion percentage in his first collegiate action. 15 touchdowns over the course of the back half of the season, not bad. A lot of those came against BYU again. The nine interceptions is the thing that you are concerned about. There were few too many turnovers, and that's the thing that I think he wants to take a step forward in this game. Start taking care of the ball a little bit more. That'll be the big thing. I think of a couple. One particular against Texas Tech where it was like, they're trying to, kind of move the ball out of their own territory, and he's throwing for Jared Wiley, and he and Jared Wiley were not on the same page on the route. That became really clear. It was one person thought Jared Wiley was going to sit down, another person thought he was going to keep running, and the ball goes right into the hand of a waiting defender, and it's just that those are things that come with more and more reps with your first team offense in practice, come with experience. So you're hoping you can kind of take that step forward and limit those while still, bringing the explosiveness and bringing the chemistry with the receivers that he showed a year ago. And I'm cautiously optimistic if they can keep him upright, which is a big question mark to me.
It does feel like he has the it factor, whatever that means. Like the intangible stuff seems really positive. Guys like him, they rally around him. But I mean, we know a man cannot survive on charisma alone. Like we watched Max Duggan try to lead a team with toughness and grit for 3 seasons, and there were some high highs, but also some low lows. And finally, he got some competent play calling and some things improved around him, and he really came into his own. But yeah, I'm excited for. I'm just excited to see him play. It's kind of unexpectedly he's become the guy. So now we get a full year of okay, what's this going to look like with him in the offense? Go ahead, Matt. Do you have other thoughts on that before we?
And I'm excited to see him with this group of pass catchers for the full season. Like, I think the Texas game was a really great example of it was this kind of unique moment of Hoover was starting to hit his stride at the moment when Savion Williams was also like really coming into his own down the backstretch of the season. And it's like, okay, like that you got to see like the potential of that connection. And now you get to see a full season, you hope, of Josh Hoover with Savion Williams as his number one receiver with some additional pieces. I mean, you bring in Eric McAllister from Boise State, you bring in Drake Dabney from Baylor. There are pieces at the skill positions for him to work with that you really, really like. And so if he can take that step forward and again, be a little bit more judicious with the ball, but he's got the playmakers out there to get the ball to them in space. Again, caution is the name of the for me when it comes to Hoover coming in 2024.
Defensively, it was bad last year. That's my hot take. So they're changing things up. They bring in Andy Avalos from Boise State, was the head coach there. Things kind of got sideways. He got let go, and he sort of fell in their lap. And so now they got a guy who has a good reputation, has been good at different stops, is going to be very aggressive, bring a lot of pressure, disguise coverages. had a few injuries at corner this offseason with Avery Hill and Vernon Glover going down. What do you feel like the biggest growing pain or transition for this defense is going to be? Because we're going to see, I mean, in some ways, like they can't really be worse than last year, famous last words, but we're going to see some probably busted coverages and just opportunities to figure things out. So what do you feel like could be the biggest area of concern there, I guess, going into the year?
Yeah, I think it's your play in the secondary. I think the depth already being stretched at corner is a concern. And it looks like your starting safety group right now is Bud Clark, who is another guy who has offered us high highs and low lows at times over the last few seasons. Abe Kamara, who's a really physical player, but can get lost in coverage sometimes, and maybe Cam Smith or Jamel Johnson. That seems like it might be up in the air. That's a group that I don't think anybody's like. I don't know if they're going to have any like all Big 12 players out of that group. And so that would be the thing that's concerning to me is, yes, if there are any busted coverages, giving up big plays. The flip side of that is they were kind of doing that last year anyway. They're giving up some big plays in a defense that
was designed to stop that. Like that's the whole point of the defense is you don't give up the big play.
Keep them
still giving up the big plays.
And at least in this instance, under Avalos, it really feels like they're going to put an emphasis on affecting the quarterback and trying to create some negative plays. They bring in Cooper McDonald and Devine Deal. Like they've got some players who can rush the passer, which is great. And I think that switch to like your base personnel package going from 3 down to 4 down also like softens the blow of losing Dominic Williams in the offseason. Like if you were still needed a true like head up over the center nose tackle, like losing him to Oklahoma would be catastrophic. It still sucks, but now that that's not as much of a need in your defense, and you can kind of and this is a defense that might favor different body types anyway. Obviously, he was one of the most talented players in the defense last year, but but you have less of a pressing need for that specific player who can fulfill that specific role, which is good for you. So I think, if they can generate some pass rush, which they haven't done really at all since Dalen Horton left, then you can, maybe you can cover up for those, deficiencies in the secondary a little bit. And I like what they've got. I'll be curious to see what they do at the linebacker group, who ends up getting the most reps. But I like Nnamdi Obiazor. And I like some of the other guys that they have the opportunity to rotate in there, whether it's Shad Banks, whether it's Johnny Hodges, Marcel Brooks, Terrence. Like they've got interesting pieces to play with there. That's that. So all that say, that front six, you can do some cool things. You can rush the passer. It's all great. Can you affect the passer enough to maybe cover up for a secondary that might have some rough times this year?
You talked about the defensive line, the other side of the trenches, another rebuild, reworking year. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. You pop into a restaurant, you're supposed to meet your friend. You're the first one there. What do? You grab your phone, you open up Twitter. You're like, I wonder what funny joke Steven told in the last 30 minutes. Maybe you don't say that to yourself, but here's a fun thing that you could waste time on your phone with. Ultimate college football head coach. Take a moment to download the game. You're going to enjoy it. I did this last night. I was piddling around. I was like, okay, let me download this, see what it is. It's really fun. You get to recruit. You get to build your team, build your program from scratch. It's an amazing game simulation where you can step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your team to glory. Can you imagine being Sonny Dykes for a day, for a moment, for a year? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, no ads, and is 100% playable offline. Visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up in the app stores and use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB for a chance to boost your game immediately. Again, that promo code is LockedOnCFB. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Download it today. Proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So, Matt, once again, TCU finds himself in a situation where they don't really have a lot of young, promising offensive linemen in the wings. So, heavy transfer portal. Offseason, you go bring in Bless Harris, who's going to be your left tackle. Went and got James Brockermeyer from Alabama. Carson Bruno from Louisiana Tech. Looks like Colton Deary, who is a returner, will be back at either guard or center. Mike Nichols, another returning player at tackle. Here's where I feel like they're at in that room. I think they have a starting five that can work. I feel like it's going to take some time, but I could see a scenario where by the middle of the season, they're playing pretty well and playing cohesively as a unit. Not much depth. And if you have any sort of injury, you're in a bad way. And that was the same situation last year, and all those boxes ended up getting checked. They had some injuries. They had to shuffle some guys around. So how confident are you in A.J. Ricker and his ability to kind of cobble together a serviceable unit again this year? Or for, I guess, try to bounce back from what was not a super serviceable unit last year?
Sure. I think I like some of the pieces that they brought in. I feel like I don't have a sense of A.J. Ricker as an offensive line coach right now. And I think part of that is because the situation at that position group was pretty dire when he took over. And so, like, offensive line relative to other positions is one where, like, it takes so long to recruit and develop it. Like, you don't have true freshmen who come in and just, like, start Power 5 college football games at, like, tackle. It just doesn't happen because you need the time to get your body to the place where it needs to be conditioned the way you need to be. And to your point, getting reps with the same group of teammates creates a lot of, having that cohesion as a group and playing together as a unit is really important there in a way that it's not maybe as important with other position groups. And so I think the jury's still out to a degree on whether or not that hire and their current, like, attempts to recruit and develop offensive linemen, like, what's the verdict on that going to be? I think the jury's still out, but I like the pieces that they brought in. And, it's one of those things where it's like you lose two of your most seasoned starters, like, not just in the offensive line, but program overall, in Andrew Coker and Brandon Coleman from a year ago. But those are two players who I think TCU fans were probably frustrated with at times, justifiably so, over the last couple of years, right? And so, I think I don't know what to make of this group. I think I like Bless Harris from Florida State. I like some of the pieces they brought in. I just don't. We haven't seen them play together, and having that cohesion together as a group is important. And if they can develop it, if you can develop the chemistry they need and play well together as a unit, that is, I think, one of the biggest opportunities for them to improve. I think the defense that we've already talked about, if I were to point out, like, the three biggest things that they could have, addressed this offseason, I think the defense was one of them. I think the offensive line was another. And if they can, that feels like less of a certainty to me, but it's one of those things where they had so much trouble a year ago, even moderate improvement could set them up in a big way and set them up to make a big step forward on offense. Because if you're not getting pushed around consistently, if you're able to control the line of scrimmage in the run game, if you're able to move the ball in short yardage, if you're able to protect the quarterback and allow yourself the opportunity for vertical passing, because quarterback is back all the time, all those things have pay multiplying benefits. But we just haven't seen this group play together. It's really hard to get a sense for it until we get a few weeks in.
I think the interior offensive line is going to be pretty solid. I feel good about that crew. Carson Bruno sliding inside will be kind of an interesting transition, but I feel like he has the athleticism to do it. Bless Harris has had a weird career. He's graded out really well. And I mean, technically he was a starter at Florida State when they've been very good and very deep at that position, but he also hasn't been available a ton. And so that's a concerning thing. And I was watching Mike Nichols a little bit this week because I was just kind of curious is like, all right, what are we getting here? He was okay. I don't know. I feel like he's one of those dudes that's just been around a while. And so people kind of have gotten into the habit of saying, oh yeah, he's good. Like he's a good player. He's been around. But when I watched him on film, I'm like, I mean, he's athletic. He can pull well. He gets out in space and does some nice things, but just general like pass protection, drop stepping, resetting your feet, not allowing guys to get their hands, up in your body. Like he sort of struggles with some of that stuff. But again, he also has had availability issues. So there's just not a ton of consistent track record there. But yeah, we'll see. Another narrative that I don't know. I've heard people say like, well, the Big 12 is not going to have like these nasty defensive lines anymore. So it's not as big of a deal, but man, it's still a big, like you got to block. You just have to. I said it all last year and I've said it this offseason. I know people are tired of me harping on it, but like there's no, you can do a few things. There's no scheming around getting your butt kicked up front. Like there's just not. There's some stuff you can do to kind of mask it, but like, it's not something that's really simple to solve, but seamless transition to running back. Cam Cook, really good reviews in fall camp. I mean, highly touted player at a high school. And then they have some interesting guys behind him. I've kind of talked myself into this group as the offseason's gone on, but Matt, what do you think about Cam and then the players behind him being productive as, whether that's a 2 or 3 headed monster this year?
Yeah, I think I'm high on Cam Cook too. 4-star recruit, had very limited opportunities last year, but in the few snaps he got, I was like, okay, yeah, like we got something to work with. And I do think it was telling that they didn't like make a real concerted effort to like try and nab somebody in the transfer portal in the offseason. Like they seemed very comfortable with like, yep, we're good. Cam, future back. Amani Bailey going to the draft. Wish you well. Cam, you're the future guy. Go for it. Great. And I think that's telling because, when they, when Zach Evans, left a few years ago, Kendra Miller was, the next guy up, but they do go and get Amani Bailey, in the portal as kind of a supplement to that. And then Kendra ended up being the guy and ends up being fine. But that was just, I think, an evidence of like a coaching staff that came in that really didn't know what they had. They're like, let's supplement this a little bit. And so that, I think that assuages some concerns because I think there can be a thing that happens a lot in like spring and even in fall camp where it's like the coaches are really talking up a particular player and the results they're seeing from them. And the reason they're doing it is because they're like, oh, we really don't have any other options. And so we need to instill some confidence in the idea of having this guy be the feature guy. That doesn't feel like this situation. This feels like they're excited about Cam Cook and he brings, he brings both the abilities as a pass catcher and as a runner that you would want in that role. So that all feels great. Trey Sanders, we kind of know what he is. They're going to use him as a short yardage and red zone guy. And he's, a great athlete. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be able to get you some tough yardage, which is great. So I think on the whole, I think you feel pretty good about the group. Again, to your point, like, can you block for them? Yeah. And be able to give them the opportunity to break something off rather than it's like they're running into the back of their offensive line because they can't get any gaps created. That is the bigger thing to me. I think, again, the talent they have, the skill positions is fine. It's can they control the line of scrimmage to set up those players for success?
Which player is Matt most excited about this upcoming season? We'll get into that and some record predictions next on Locked On Horned Frogs. Your team every day. Well, he did it earlier because he's a pro. Matt set up a really good time to do a Gametime read because Gametime is where you get tickets, whether it's a comedy show, a musical, if you're into that, a sporting event, which you're most likely into that listening to this podcast. Gametime app makes it easier for you. You can get $20 off your first purchase by using the code LOCKEDON. Download it today. A couple things that I love about the Gametime app: no hidden fees. There are fees, but they tell you up front what you're going to end up paying. They give you a picture of what you're going to see when you sit down, so there's no surprises there. And the tickets go directly to your phone, so you can put them in your wallet or whatever the case is. But it goes straight to your phone, and you have easy access to it. Gametime app, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network, best secondary ticket app on the market today. Okay, Matt, give me one player that you're most excited to watch for the TCU Horned Frogs this year.
That's a good question. I think I would go with Eric McAllister.
Right.
Yeah, as a player who didn't even finish the season for Boise State last year and would have led TCU in receiving yards, even with a shortened season. I think having a legitimate number 2 option, it felt like they were searching for that for so much. Is it Dalen Wright? Is it Warren Thompson? Are they going to try and have a slot guy fill that role? Having 2 legitimate threats on the outside, and McAllister and Savion Williams, I think will open things up for what this offense wants to do in a big way.
Well, same wavelength there. Somebody told me on YouTube yesterday I need to be more positive, and I'm going to take that to heart. I'm all in on the Savion Williams hype train. I think this is the year he puts it all together. Him and Josh Hoover seem to have good rapport, good chemistry late in the season last year. He's got the physical traits. He actually, in some ways, can go up and get a ball better than even like Quentin could back in the day. Like QJ was a heck of an athlete, and he was such a vertical threat. But I'm excited about seeing Savion unlocked in that capacity, and also just getting the ball to him in space.
Mm-hmm.
Sneakily, he was pretty good at that as well. And apparently, they said this in press conferences, famous like kind of off-season talk, but they're talking about putting him in the backfield, moving him around the formation. So finding ways to kind of force feed him the ball, Matt.
Absolutely. I think to your point about like the jump ball role, I think he, in recent memory, is one of the better receivers in terms of like really going up and attacking the ball in the air. To your point, like Quentin would do body catches more often than not, and he had the frame and the leap where that he could do that, and it kind of didn't matter. Where Savion is like, I'm going up and getting this ball, and this ball is mine. Or at least that's the attitude he comes with it a little bit more. And then, again, the Texas game being a really great example of, hurdling a defender in open space. He can be really dangerous after the catch. And we've yet to really see it, I think, just because they haven't really been able to execute it and do it well. But like there is a Savion Williams pass play coming up at some point. Like they have raved multiple times about his arm strength, him having the strongest arm on the team. They will absolutely, to your point, they'll absolutely like get him in the backfield or have some sort of end around or something where, he gets the ball and like they're doing whatever. And then they use that later to set up some sort of like wide receiver pass, which I think will be fun. So yeah, I'm excited for him, as a senior. Like this is his chance to kind of like really assert himself, and it's all set up for him. And I hope he, takes advantage of it.
Okay. That made me think of this, which might be it's bad memory for some people, but in like the 2014, 2015 era, nobody loved the wide receiver pass more than Cumbie and Meacham. Like they loved it.
Absolutely.
And our guy Cam Eccles-Looper, who I believe was a former quarterback in high school, like they let him do it a couple times. But I feel like a very underrated play in that 2014 TCU Baylor game, because there were like a million plays that went over 20 yards. But they ran like a reverse to Cam, and he set his feet and threw the ball to BJ Catalon on a wheel. And when I tell you this was a dime, like it was not, he did not float it. It wasn't like the dude was like Catalon had a step on him, but it had to be a throw. And like he threw it across the field. I don't know. It was just, it always sticks out in my mind is like, that was an amazing play, an amazing throw by a wideout. It also kind of speaks to how ridiculous that team was, that they were running stuff like that. But maybe we'll see something like that from Savion this year. That would be fun.
It would be great. It would be great. Yeah, I remember they would do that with Cam. They did it with Colby Listenby a few times.
Yeah.
He had a touchdown in the Peach Bowl to Aaron Green, running a similar deal. And then later on, doing it with with Des White, doing it with, I think, did Sean Nixon throw one to Josh Dotson at one point? I'm feeling
sounds familiar, yeah.
But it was, to your point, it was very much a part of their repertoire, right? And so I would very much anticipate us seeing that at some point, especially from an offense that loves to do a gadget play. It's very much in their DNA for sure.
So I've settled on 8-4. I think that's where I'm at. I feel like that's pretty fair expectation. I feel like you're going to see progress, but there's still going to be some games where, things just don't click properly. What's your record prediction, Matt? It's going to be etched in stone forever.
Right. I'm like looking through the schedule, even like as we look at this right now. I think the only game to me that I should probably the two games that stand out to me as like, this is legitimately concerning are at Utah on October 19th, and actually before that, at Kansas on September 28th. Those are two teams that I think you have to have a ton of respect for. The fact that and to your point about like getting manhandled up front, or like not physical defense, like Utah is going to. I don't know what Utah is going to do like long term in the Big 12. I don't even know what they're going to do this year. They're going to beat some teams senseless in terms of like the physicality with which they play the game. That is a game that I think TCU, like, I'm personally terrified of, just as an aside. But beyond those two games, I don't see a game on these are games, everything feels like a game that TCU will be favored, or that feels like probably like a toss-up, like 3 points one way or the other in terms of who's favored, right? And so then it's a matter of like, okay, how confident are you in TCU in those close games? They did extraordinarily well with them in 2022. They did really, really poorly with them last year. I think they regress and they kind of even out a little bit this year. This feels like a 7-5-ish kind of.
Boo!
No, so hear me out.
That's only one difference from what I said, but
right, exactly. Okay. Like as an aside, it does. 8 wins just feels so much better than 7. It does.
8 sounds like you got a good team on your hands.
Right. Precisely. And I'm also doing like just the 12 games. I'm not talking about bowl games are so hard to predict anyway. I'm going to leave that out of the equation. In my estimation, they would make a bowl game. To me, you get Texas Tech at home, you get Oklahoma State at home. That's great. You get Arizona at home, which is great. You go to Baylor, but I'm still like not sure if I believe in what's going on with them right now. Like I know there's a lot of hype in terms of like the talent they've been able to acquire. But I'll tell you what, like 7-5 feels just about right to me. The thing that will completely change the way I feel about them. I mentioned earlier, there were 3 big things that stood out to me in terms of ways they could take a step forward, right? Defense was one of them, and I'm anticipating them making a big step forward. I don't know that they'll be like really good, but I think they'll at least be average, which will be a big step up from a year ago. The second thing is the offensive line. We've talked about that ad nauseum. It's kind of an unknown, right? The third thing that I think is going to be the differentiator for them between, are you like a 7-5-ish team or are you a 9-ish win team, is how are you when it comes to situational football? And to me, I do not believe. Sonny Dykes, I think, had a quote about it even earlier this year about just like we were one of the worst like situational football teams in the country last year. About when I'm talking about like short yardage and putting points on the board in scoring territory and in the red zone, right? And they were abysmal in those respects a year ago. What have they done to like materially change that this year? To me, I think it's like it goes right down to the root, right? It's because of the kind of offense that you're running and the person calling the plays in Kendall Browse, right? Kendall Browse has a history going back to Arkansas and Florida State and even Baylor of like, getting short yardage and you drop something cute, right? Get into scoring territory and you struggle because the field gets smaller, right? And you don't pay attention to detail because you're trying to go tempo, and so you get pointless penalties that shoot you in the foot, right? If they can clean up some of those details, then I think suddenly you feel really, really good. Because then, again, we've talked about the skill position players. We've talked about the defense taking a step forward. Suddenly it's like, oh, you're not finding yourself in a bunch of like really tight. If you find yourself in those tight games, you feel better about your ability to hit a big play or to be able to execute in a key red zone scenario and break it open for you. But if you're not able to win in those key situations and pay attention to the details, then you feel like a decent 7-ish win team. That's the thing that takes them over the top for me. I'm waiting to see that they're able to do that before I predict that they will do that. So,
yeah, and I think in that regard, we're going to learn a lot about Sonny this year because he's been pretty hands-off. Like, that's just his style. And there were some questions going into last season of like, well, maybe Kendall had a change of heart or has kind of evolved because at Arkansas, they honestly slowed down their pace significantly. And he was doing some cool things in the run game that was intriguing, but it seems like that was
Sam Pittman.
That was Sam Pittman and KJ Jefferson, the quarterback. You could do some really cool things with his ability to run the ball, and just his size too. So I don't think the pace is going to change. Now, can they clean up some of that stuff that you talked about? Hopefully, but I remember going on a rant after that Tech game and just being like, "This is bad." Like all the little things that they weren't hitting on was really concerning. So you're right. That's gonna tell the story of the season. And after the weekend, we have a game week, friends, and we're gonna get ready and hyped up for TCU football. Matt will be joining us all year long. Actually, I haven't confirmed that with him, but I'm just gonna say it and manifest it. I don't believe in manifesting. I believe in Jesus. But we're gonna take a break for the weekend, and we'll see you back on Monday. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.